Of Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. This is the place where you're entitled to Brad's opinion. And now for your host, Brad Allard.
Well, good morning. Taking a little break from the local stuff today. Doing a home podcast, and it's a necessary break. It's been lots of fun, and I got many more shows like this to go, or with politicians and local candidates, and I'll kind of briefly go over the schedule towards the end of the show. But it's also good sometimes just to talk about other things, just to get your mind off what's going on locally. How you doing, Taylor?
I can't complain.
You can't complain, of course. How's things going over at Local Legends Lab?
They're going lovely.
Yeah, well, you guys, these candidates ought to be calling you. They ought to be helping you make
For
out
sure.
some ads or something like that. I know you helped.
Yeah.
You made one for Victoria, and I thought it was well done.
Yeah.
And so, if you're listening out there, maybe I'd encourage your candidates to call old Taylor here, and he can hook you right up. Anyway, we're going to talk about the banking situation in California, that SV Bank, because there's other banks as well that are in similar situations, and also kind of differentiate between what you're hearing on MSNBC and Fox News, because they're both having two different takes on it, and neither take is correct. And I've talked to people that are in the banking, including my cousin, the king of Kiowa County, who ran a bank for many, many years, and he could see right through what was going on, all this, and so he kind of gave me an education. Plus, it was interesting. I was reading on the websites, on the various news sites, from left and right. The more thoughtful commentators are coming to the same conclusion. This was a failure of regulation, as of oversight, and it was incompetence, and it was malfeasance in a sense of just poorly run banking, and also an extreme lack of oversight by existing regulatory laws. They just did not get the job done. And people on the right want to blame Biden and woke capitalism or social related lending practices, ESG, and all that other business. And on the left, they want to talk about greedy capitalism and all this other stuff. And really, as always, the truth is in the middle. So hopefully I can get through this and explain this to you decently. But before we get to that, let's talk about some crass capitalism by selling some airtime here. CrossFit Burleson, 317 Southwest Wilshire. Also, we are, I just got a text in. Don't worry about it, guys. CrossFitBurleson.com will tell you about the all the plans, the training, the classes, the membership fees and plans, whatnot. It's a great place to do a extensive workout, and for those who are pretty serious about their workouts. 317 Southwest Wilshire is behind Stone City Soup and Valley Cleaners, that strip mall back there. So check it out, because if you're looking for something to, serious workout, it's a good place to go. Second of all, let's talk about Shandy Stogsdill. Shandy will be on the show on Monday. She is, as we've been discussing, she's going to be on running for school board, place 4, and we'll be talking some more about what she's learned. She has an event tomorrow night at the Lost Oak, at the winery. And as far as the event is for educators to come and tell her what you're thinking about these various things going on in the education field. So it's a good chance for you, if you're in the education field or you're interested in the education field, you need to go out to Lost Oak at 4 to 7 and have a glass of wine and talk to Shandy about what's going on, what your concerns are with the school system as a whole. So it's a good way to communicate with a potential office holder. Also, but she really is on here primarily because of her real estate. If you're looking to buy and sell real estate in this area, you really need to kind of get a hold of her in a hurry, because it's going, and it's still a very hot market here. I know what you're reading in other media, that those real estate markets slowing down and all this other stuff, and that may be true to a large degree, but talk to Shandy and she can help you through it. Also, thank you to Otto at our place. I was just there yesterday after one of my BNI meetings. A friend and I went there. He had a big old heaping breakfast brunch thing, and I had I had biscuits and gravy, which is a smaller meal for me normally, and it was great. That's the kind of food they serve, is comfort food. And so, Otto, thank you for what you do. Thank you for your community service. Also, thank you for Chris. Same thing. I went by on Tuesday, a little sponsor care, and they had just finished up having a chamber blue ribbon cutting event. And Wild is a great place to go for business. It's a great place to go have a calm drink and a smoke. Maybe if you wanted to go into the humidor, the tobacconist there will help you with all of these things. So it's a good place to go. And they have a conference room if you want to take like a business meeting there, which would be a great idea. You know, a little break in the action. Go over there, you know, have your meeting afterwards. Have a little happy hour. They have happy hours from 3 to 7 on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Also, thank you to Tiffany over at Local Life Magazine. It's been out for a while for this month. It's going to come out in the first week of April. As always, she's really the place to go to when you need to know what's going on in town, because in the middle of the magazine, they have local events for the month. Plus the fact that they have all these direct ads for you, the Burleson Johnson County customer, you know, that goes to 30,000 homes. And so it's one of the best direct advertising strategies you can adopt, other than, of course, you know, Mr. Allard's neighborhood. Anyway, thank you, Tiffany, for what you do. Also, thank you to the gala over at Southern Gym. The location, hopefully, within about a month. I mean, I talked to her yesterday at our BNI meeting, and you know, there's this contractor holdup or this supply holdup, but that's the goal, is to have it in by April 15th. I know that she desperately wants to have it done before Kentucky Derby Day. Gayla is into horse racing and to horse raising, and so she wants to have a Kentucky Derby Day in their new location. So Southern Gym right now at the third floor of the Windmill Building, soon to be at the bottom floor of the building. So go check it out for repairs and inventory and appraisals, discussions, whatever. And thank you to Hot Works over in 731 beside Chicken Salad Chick and over by the theaters and Kroger's and all that. It's called the Commons, I believe. But anyway, Hot Works is a great workout. It helps you with your joints and your muscles. It helps you with your inflammation issues. It's really good for, particularly for like older folks like myself who may not be able to do it as strenuous a workout, but it's a good workout doing the infrared system. So talk to Michelle, and they have memberships, they have plans, they have supervision. They also are open 24/7, and it's a totally secure place. Every time I've gone over there, like the last time I went over there a couple of weeks ago, they have to let me in, which shows that they're pretty serious about security. So it's a good place to go for a different type of workout. Thank you also to Melissa over at Texas Farm Bureau, 682-804-0534. Have her look over your insurance, and if Texas Farm Bureau can save you some money, she will. If she can't, she'll tell you that, but I'm almost sure they'll be able to save you some money, because you know, I had a pretty good insurance company before, but I asked her to look over my stuff, and I saved some money and upgraded my house insurance and my life insurance, which Robin was much too eager for me to upgrade. I don't know what that's all about. But anyway, let's see what else we got going on in the community today. Also, we have Light Up the Night coming April 1st. This is for the Center for ASD over by Crestmont. And they're going to have a petting zoo. They're going to have checkers, the magician, glow in the dark activities, food trucks, vendors, all sorts of things going on. It's to raise money. It's a free admission, but they're all raising money for the Center for ASD, and they're doing it in partnership with the Burleson Parks and Rec Department. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's over at the Brick, and it's going to be a really good experience for y'all. You also see the great work that they do. They do great work for these young people and older people, actually, too, with that are on the autism spectrum. And Bianca Lowry is part of our BNI group, and she just really has a program that going on. Lisa Boltinghouse has been on the show several times. I bet she'll be on again pretty soon. And it's a great organization. Also, we have BNI Visitors Day. This is the group I've been mentioning. I am part of BNI, a networking group. So is Gayla. So is Michelle. So is Melissa. And it's from March 29th from 8:45 to around 10:30ish, 10:45, depends. And it's at the Hampton Inn. We're going to be meeting there for about another month, and then we're moving to Old South to meet. But this place has Hampton Inn will have more space for us. It's again March 29th, 10:40 from 8:45 to 10:45 roughly, and it's a great place to network, to grow your business. I very much encourage you to give it a consideration if you're a business owner, because it's helped my business tremendously, and they're good people to boot. It really are. So check out BNI Visitors Day. All right. Whew. I do know, just off the top of my head, I have any more logos. I know that Harvest House has a Vineyard Vibe thing going on, and also a week from tomorrow over at Pathways around 6 to 8 or 6:30 to 8:30. Next Step Women's Center has an event going on, And so be checking out their websites, both Harvest House and Next Step, for events coming up in the next couple of weeks. Okay, let's talk about the banks. When I was teaching economics, one of the hardest things to teach the students, and I'm not trying to imply anything about the students, but one of the hardest things to teach to the students was the banking system. It's complex. Okay, it really is. The kids usually would grasp supply and demand fairly quickly, and then at the macro level, those macro discussions, they got it eventually, most of them, and but banking, I spent like 2 weeks on it, and I see nothing but glazed eyes, and like, what is this? How is this possible? Because a lot of the students thought of banks basically you put your money in and it's sitting there waiting for them in a vault. Well, no, that's not how it works, and we now know that as adults. But then you're trying to make something that's very, very theoretical almost, trying to, and they're making it concrete. It's really kind of tough. But anyway, uh, what was the biggest difficulty to hurdle overcome is the different definitions for our assets and liabilities. We put $1,000 in the bank. To us, it's an asset, but to the bank, it's a liability. Okay, and it's the bank's responsibility and job to turn that liability into an asset, and they do that by lending it out, which is a preferred way. Or if they can't do it, they try to put it in some short-term interest earning account like the overnight Fed fund. Now, if you're not familiar with all the workings of the Fed, the overnight Fed's fund is a place to park your money and still earn at least a minuscule amount of interest as opposed to lying dead in the bank accounts. The worst thing banks can do is have dead money, as they call it. That money is not earning something somewhere. So they'd rather earn, 0.8% of a point overnight than they would just letting it lie there in the bank accounts. But there are other types of short-term liquid assets they could put their money in. And I was talking to my cousin about all this, and it verified a lot of things I was reading, and it clarified a lot of things I was reading. You have to kind of differentiate between the political rhetoric and what's going on in reality. The truth of the matter is Silicon Valley Bank failed because of a failure of using existing regulations. It was carelessness and malfeasance on the part of the bank operators and their board of directors. It was carelessness on the California and FDIC bank regulators. They allowed their balance sheet to get so unbalanced in terms of the asset liability mix that they put themselves at a great risk. In other words, what happened with the Silicon Valley Bank is that they got a huge rush of cash because of COVID, pandemic related causes, and because of huge amounts of money that's being invested in tech, high tech. Silicon Valley Bank caters primarily to the venture capitalists in California, and they were getting huge amounts of money and subsidies from various sources because private sources were putting their money into these venture capitalist firms. Some of the public money is going into it. Some of the money from the Inflation Reduction Act, which is still an insulting name for an act. A lot of that money has not been spent yet. Some of it has, but not nearly as much as some of the people were claiming. But basically what happens is these venture capitalists were flush with cash, and they put it in Silicon Valley Bank. Before the pandemic, Silicon Valley Bank had $60 billion in deposits. Now they had $200 billion. And because there was so much flush cash, the demand for loans from Silicon Valley Bank wasn't as high as it was pre-pandemic. They didn't need to borrow because they had plenty of money. These venture capitalists had plenty of money to do whatever they wanted to do. So what Silicon Valley Bank did is they took this excess money and put about half of it, literally over about $100 billion or more, in long-term treasury bonds, which is foolish. Okay, they put it in 10-year plus treasury bonds with a fixed rate of interest. So yeah, they were getting a higher rate of return on those bonds than if they had put them in overnight Fed funds rates or other short-term assets, short-term investments, but they were getting a better rate of return. The problem is, though, when you extend these bonds out, you're paying for 10-year, 15-year bonds, etc. You're locked in. Okay, you're not very mobile. You're not very liquid. And if you have a situation which is exactly what happens here. If you have a situation where interest rates rise, the value of your bonds declines. Now, not the par value. If you bought $1 million bond, you're going to get $1 million back in 10 years. But if you're buying your $1 million bond at 2%, and now the Treasury is issuing bonds at 4%, the only way you're going to unload your bond in a hurry is to take a big cut at how much you're willing to take for that bond. Instead of getting $1 million, you might get $850,000. So you're going to take a loss. Every time rates rise, the existing value of bonds, if they're below that new rate, declines. Because no one's going to buy your 2% bond off your hands when they can take that same money and buy a 4% bond that's not being offered. Nobody's going to take it unless you give them a significant discount. And so foolishly, this Silicon Valley Bank, and they're not the only ones that are doing this either, because they wanted the higher rates of return, they bought longer-term investments, longer-term securities. And then we start having inflation. And then the Fed starts cracking down on inflation by raising the interest rate, which is what the Fed is there to do. And it's raised the interest rates significantly since the end of the pandemic and this inflation started. And so the value of the bond holdings for Silicon Valley Bank declined. Now, all of this should have been observed by the banking regulators. Banking information of a financial nature is public information because it's guaranteed by the government up to $250,000. I'll get to that in a minute. It's public information. It's to be published every quarter. And plus, when a banking regulator from California or the FDIC or the Federal Reserve shows up at your front door, they're not there to make friends and have coffee. They're there, and they're not there for the calendar and the free clock or whatever else. They're there to see your books, and then you better show them right then or right now. They don't need any kind of legal process to do it. Just, here I am. Let's get after it. So this could not have been unobserved by California regulators. If it was not, they're incredibly, incredibly incompetent. Same with the FDIC. So the question I would have is this incompetence or is this cronyism? Because it's a California bank and it's all these big-time donors and political activists and whatever else, was that part of the situation? We don't know. But the point is that the regulators allowed this situation to continue when they should have known better from the first part. They knew that Silicon Valley Bank and other banks like it, like Signature Bank, like First Republic Bank out of San Francisco, and there's a couple others I'm reading about. They had a very, very dangerous asset liability mix, as my cousin called it. That they had primed themselves into a situation that had what happened Friday occurred, they wouldn't have the liquidity to deal with it. And that's exactly what happened. You had an old-fashioned bank run. They're still trying to figure out what sparked it. Was it Twitter, or was it rumors, or was it other issues? But what happened is the word got out that Silicon Valley Bank was in trouble, and people pulled their money out by the millions. And Silicon Valley Bank did not have the liquidity to meet those obligations on those deposits. And they tried to sell some of those assets, and they took a big loss. And so finally, they were getting to the point where they're going to be insolvent within about 5 hours. So that's when they shut it down before the end of the business day on Friday. And then over the weekend, you had the same thing happen with Signature Bank in a sense. It wasn't so much they put their money in long-term securities, but they had bet heavily on cryptocurrency. And cryptocurrency has taken such a beating. And the irony about the Signature Bank out of New York was on their board of directors is ex-Congressman Barney Frank, who wrote the Dodd-Frank law. Now, people want to blame Dodd-Frank for what happened. That's really not what the problem is. In this case, I don't care for Dodd-Frank at all because I think it put a lot of pressure on regional and smaller banks while let the big boys get off the hook. But that's a whole nother discussion. But it really wasn't the regulations caused by Dodd-Frank that caused these problems. It was a lack of enforcement of these regulations that caused these problems. And the Signature Bank bet heavily on crypto, which is foolishness. And they're now going to be in receivership, just like Silicon Valley Bank is. Now, as far as the criticisms, on the left, they want to talk about greedy capitalism, and we need more regulations. Of course, everybody's favorite economics professor, Senator Warren out of Massachusetts, said it was all Trump's fault. That's rubbish. They did loosen the regulations in 2018, but that's not what caused it here. This was not a matter of we need more or better existing laws. This was a matter we didn't enforce existing laws. So, Warren just looking for a scapegoat. And of course, the White House spokespeople are doing the same thing. MSNBC is talking about crony capitalism, but they don't talk about it because in the same way that you and I might talk about it, because many of those Silicon Valley donors are politically sympathetic to MSNBC. On the right, they say it's all Joe Biden's fault, which, if you want to say that the overall economic situation that caused us to have to raise our interest rates is Joe Biden's fault, okay. But this wasn't a direct action by Joe Biden. It wasn't a executive order he passed or a law that was passed in Congress with his signature on it. This was something that was just, we weren't taking care of business. Now, I could see why people might blame Biden for creating an environment which inflation is occurring, but with all the money he threw in with COVID and with the Inflation Reduction Act, which calls me every time I say it, and other potential inflationary measures. So sure, if you want to use that, that's fine. But I'm just saying that if you want to make a direct line from Biden to this, you're going to have to find something more concrete than just an overall economic status. As far as the people on Fox and others are yelling and hollering about ESG, which is environmental, social, and corporate governance. In other words, it's what people are calling woke investing. That's not really the case as much. It really wasn't a political philosophy of Silicon Valley Bank that caused this. No, yeah, I read reports about how they wasted money on politically woke activities, and that's fine, great, wonderful. This is San Francisco. We're talking about like First Republic, and they spent money on woke political causes and environmental causes and whatever else. But that in and of itself would not have caused this failure. Plus, the right's talking about how other social policies of the Biden administration causes. I think they're looking for reasons to blame Joe Biden. And believe me, I could blame Joe Biden for anything. I woke up with a head cold this morning. It's Joe Biden's fault. That's kind of attitude. There's a great meme that was on Facebook this morning showing this guy tripping and falling and and spilling all this stuff he was carrying. And at the bottom it says, "Thanks, Obama." That. When I see stuff like that, it's humorous. But I like to save the real criticisms of Mr. Biden, which I have a lot of, for legitimate stuff, as opposed to just a blanket condemnation every time something happens. It's Joe Biden's fault. So I think I would not let Fox or MSNBC or CNN or any of these left or right wing commentators, and I don't mean left liberal or conservative commentators, I mean left wing, right wing commentators, distract from the real issue, and that is California and the FDI screwed up. Silicon Valley Bank screwed up. They ran a very poor bank, and people should have known that. These venture capitalists should have known that. And that's where I get to the second part of the condemnation, if you will. They should have known that. The FDIC guarantees up to $250,000. That was part of the Dodd-Frank law from 2008. Okay, I get it. They should get it. Now, I'm never going to ever be in danger of exceeding that $250,000 limit. I'm not Taylor, for example. I mean, so the point is that
ha ha.
Okay, fine. But the point is that these venture capitalists that put in millions of dollars did know that that money was going to be uninsured. They just didn't take care of their own business. Roku, for example, had, I believe I saw in the New York Times, like $487 million in that bank. Only $250,000 legally was protected. But Roku should have known that. Now, if they didn't like that limit or they were willing to take that risk, then great. But they took a risk in putting that much money in a bank that was run that poorly. And several other venture capitalists did as well from Silicon Valley. And this is one thing that both the legitimate liberal and conservative commentators both agree on, is that the fact that the FDIC is bailing all those people out vastly past that limit is atrocious. And it's going to cost us. That's to me, the real problem. We have a situation here, not so much bad policy, but bad actions, bad management, and they're all going to get bailed out. And I don't mean just bad management on the part of Silicon Valley Bank, but these venture capitalists who are willing to put that much uninsured money into a bank that they weren't paying attention to. And so we're bailing them out. Now, Joe comes on Monday morning and says that not a dime of taxpayer money will be spent. Technically, that's true. It's going to come out of the FDIC fund. Banks pay, it's like an insurance policy. They pay it to the FDIC every month, a certain percentage. I don't know the exact dollar amount or exact percentage, but they pay into the fund. That fund's going to get depleted very quickly. Where's the rest of the money going to come from? Well, unless there's an authorization for more money, that's going to be a real good question. We're not going to be able to sustain these kind of massive guarantees of deposits. The difference between what happened in 08 and 09 is in 08, we guaranteed the banks. Today, we're guaranteeing the depositors. Okay. The banks, that was very controversial back then. And the fact that nobody went to jail was a disgrace. And the fact that, Goldman Sachs and Bear Stearns and all these other big time outfits got away basically with criminal activities, and they still got their bonuses the next year, was a disgrace. This is different in the sense that this money's not going to the bank; it's going to the depositor. So if you had like $1 million in that bank, you're going to get your $1 million. Now you can leave it in that bank or put it somewhere else, which is probably what's going to happen. But we have now opened up a big can of worms, so to speak, because what's going to happen with the next bank? First Republic is struggling. They're also a San Francisco-based bank. If they go out, what's going to happen? Are those deposits over $250,000 going to be insured? Signature Bank, same thing. Credit Suisse is having big trouble, and they have major banking connections here in the United States. And if they, start calling their loans in from some of these major banks, that's going to cause some rippling effect there. Where is this money going to come from? Eventually, and not anytime in the far future, but soon, we're going to have congressional authorization to refill that FDIC fund. So when Joe Biden says not one dime is going to bail out Silicon Valley bank depositors, he's true Monday, but it will not be true the next time or the time after. There will come a time in which that FDIC fund, it's not bottomless, and it's going to be a problem. And then we'll see how Joe dances around that one. That's the real problem, though. We have now caught up a situation that basically everybody's accounts, regardless of the amount, will be insured. There was an editorial in the New York Times, which shows the kind of the bipartisan nature of the criticism, says, well, if you bail out Silicon Valley and Signature and maybe First Republic, who's next? And so that's some of the real problems that people are having with this. There will be no risk involved at all. And you will be creating a tremendous moral hazard, as economics call it, basically because there'll be no repercussions for your actions. This is exactly what happened in the late 1980s with savings and loans. As old timers remember savings and loans. For you young timers, the credit union essentially is a savings and loan. But the savings and loan were a type of banking institution. And they had deposit and bank protections as well, just like a commercial bank did. And you got all these fly-by-nighters and cowboys that got into banks, Vernon Savings, Bright Savings, all these savings and loans, and they basically ran them in the ground. They shipwrecked those savings and loans, made money, and then let the government pick up the tab. And it was during the H.W. Bush administration that they had to pay out about $700 billion to depositors for all the stuff they were doing. It's interesting that savings and loans debacle is the reason why Jerry Jones owns the Cowboys, because the man who owned the Cowboys prior to that, a guy named Bum Bright, who lived up to his first name and not his last name, owned Bright Savings and Loan, and it went belly up, and so he sold the Cowboys for about $160 million. Now they're worth $5 billion. Still stink, but that's fine. But the point is that this happened before. We had malfeasance and, in some cases, violations of the law and complete lack of enforcement and complete lack of oversight, and it cost us. And this is going to cost us again, because how are we going to justify not bailing out other banks without political accusations being thrown? Because Silicon Valley Bank was very politically connected, and it was mostly with the Democrat Party. You're going to have people hollering next time you have a bank in Texas go out and they have connections with the Republican Party and they don't get bailed out. You're going to have a lot of fallout, and they will get bailed out, really, because there's no other choice now. Politically, there's no other option. You can't say yes to a California bank and no to a Florida bank. You talk about a massive political and legal mess. Forget it. Second of all, the real problem also is that with this moral hazard, you're going to have bank people taking more risk and more risk because they're in the pursuit of ever larger returns on investments, that they know that if they blow out the bank, then there's not going to be much repercussion to them personally. There's all these investigations going on. Did the Silicon Valley Bank executives know this? And then you find out that several of their executives sold their stock a couple of weeks ago and made profits. And then this all happens and everybody's holding the bag. That you're going to have a situation where everybody's accounts are going to be insured up to numerous amounts of money, whatever it is. And so we're going to see billions of dollars of money going to corporate and venture capitalist accounts. They basically have made it, they're going to make it impossible to fail. And failure is a part of the capitalist system. All right, it sounds harsh, but it's true. Failure is an essential part of the capitalist system. One of the many reasons socialism failed in Europe is because nothing could fail. And so they were supporting these ancient industries and processes and manufacturing plants and whatever else is that were long overdue for a rehaul, but there's no incentive for it. And if you have a situation where you basically are given a blank check, you're going to have a lot of banks doing what Silicon Valley Bank did, and that is go for the higher returns. And if everything goes belly up, then the feds will come in and bail out the depositors. Theoretically, that's supposed to be against the law, but you're not going to see any charges filed here. Or if they are, they're going to be dismissed. You're not going to see any charges filed here. The banking regulators of California failed us and them, and American people will be paying for it. Another way the American people may be paying for it, if not directly through taxes, is going to be higher bank fees, because the FDIC is going to assess their banks. Not every bank is a member of the FDIC, but we're talking about those that are not members of the FDIC or small, very small country banks, and just about everybody I know of. I don't think I've ever seen a bank that's not FDIC insured, but they're going to assess higher insurance fees to them, and they'll pass that along to you with higher overdraft fees, higher banking fees, fees for this, debit card fees. Next time you use your debit card outside of your bank, it's going to cost you $2.50 to use instead of $1.50 or whatever it is. I never use my debit card unless it's at the bank. But the point is that that's where you're going to be paying for it as well. And so for the FDIC to make up some of that money without direct subsidies from the government, they're going to be charging you more. So kind of sum all this business up. Before we start pointing fingers at crony capitalism and venture capitalists, or before you start pointing fingers at Joe Biden and woke capitalism and ESG and all this other business, we need to assess the details. Do the venture capitalists have a fault in this? And the answer is yes, they do, because they knowingly put more money in that was insured, assuming that it'd be safe. That's fine, but they didn't take care of business. So when they had a bank run, a lot of them were caught off guard. Now, some people said, well, they should just go broke. They should just go bankrupt. Well, it's not quite that easy, guys. I haven't really focused on that part, the individuals involved. The venture capitalists themselves may not be damaged permanently, but a lot of people who work for these people would not have had their money. I had somebody over the weekend tell me that her husband's company has a major account at that particular bank. It's a California-based company. It's nationwide. And if that bank went under and they didn't get the money for her company, his company rather, preserved, then they wouldn't get paid. And that, it's, would have a big ripple effect. So yeah, I get it. To say, let them eat, dirt and they can, they deserve what they get. Well, there's a lot of people we know that we would never really realize it'd be a massive ripple effect. So yeah. Do we bail them out? Not because of the venture capital's sake, but because of all the people that would have been hurt by that. There's a lot of people who work for these companies, like I'm thinking of, I don't want to mention names, but I will mention Roku or whatever, that would have been laid off and unpaid. So I got it. If the FDIC didn't come in, then Fat Cat venture capitalists may be okay, but all the people that work for him or her would not be. And all these startups and all these high-tech companies, it'd be bad for a lot of people, including a lot of people here in Texas, since we're now so connected with high tech. It'd devastate Austin. I get it. I hate it, but I get it. My problem is there should be some sort of penalty for venture capitalists knowingly put their money into an account over the insured amount and then just walking away with no damage. I don't know what that would be, but there you are. I am irritated very much with the regulators of the FDIC and the Federal Reserve and the California regulators. They should have seen this from a mile off. But a lot of people. Again, I'm going to go back to the point I just made. I read a lot of people. They'll message me privately when I put out what I'm going to talk about, whatever else, and say this should happen, that should happen. I get it. Your anger is justified. I'd hate to see tens of thousands of people affected by the poor performance of the bank and the regulators. And that's what could happen. And so angrily, I admit this is the best thing we can do. But now we've opened up a huge can of worms, and there has to be some sort of adjustment on this. We cannot guarantee every bank account held in the United States, no matter how large. The amount of money would be significant, to say the least. Trillions just begins the conversation. Now, I was going to talk about some other things today too, but I'm going to just leave it at this because I got an open day on Tuesday. What I'm going to talk about Tuesday is how Mr. Biden is starting to adopt some of Trump's strategies or policies, like with immigration, like with the drilling deal he just struck with Conoco in Alaska, like with the veto of the Washington, D.C. Reformation, if you will, of their criminal laws and penalties. All three of those things are very interesting. But that's a topic that'll take more than time, and I don't want to, just kind of lightly touch it. So it'll give you a reason to tune in on Tuesday. Now on Monday, I have Shandy going to talk about some school issues about her race and whatnot. On Thursday of next week, I'm going to talk to our old friends at Meatmeisters. It's almost Easter, and they have their annual charity that they raise money for. The buying of hams and whatever else, and we're going to talk about that for Easter Sunday. And I got one last year. Took it to my mother and dad's house. It was great. It was well worth. It was $45 in. I'll find out Thursday if that's gone up because of inflation or whatever. But as you know, Meatmeisters does outdoor grilling for charitable events, and this is how they raise the money for it, is through this deal. Also, I have just about all the candidates on again at least one more time next April. I only have one open date in April. That's how now we're getting down to the nitty gritty in the election season. It's getting intense, but hey, we've been here before. Just hold true, guys, and we'll see what happens. Thank you for your time, Taylor. Try not to get in trouble this weekend.
I'll see what I can do.
I'll see you in the studio on Monday, and I'll see the rest of y'all then too. Bye bye.